All systems go.
All systems go. I think. At least everything on my end looks good.
We'll see if Mojave makes Zencaster crash.
Oh, you upgraded?
I did. Yep.
Nice.
It actually
And?
solved a hardware issue I was having. I've got a OWC Thunderbolt 3 dock, and
Okay.
it's been flickering in and out, and I thought it was a bad power cable, so I called the company, and they're great. They sent me a replacement Thunderbolt 3 cable and then also a replacement power cable, but it was still doing it. So I'm like, whatever. What the heck? I hear it's pretty stable. I heard somebody say it actually fixed some of their issues. I think it was Katie Floyd on Mac Power Users.
Okay.
I'm like, all right, I'll go for it. And sure enough, I've had no issues with my Thunderbolt 3 dock
Crazy.
since I upgraded. So it must have been like a Thunderbolt 3 issue with High Sierra, but seems to be just fine.
Interesting. I have not upgraded, but that's not a surprise to anyone who knows me. I want to, and I'm actually planning to as soon as I have two kind of crucial client projects I'm working on right now, and I have all of their code finely tuned on my Mac. So I'm a little nervous to upgrade because those two are still in play, or were. I guess one of them has wrapped up this week. But I have one that's outstanding, and it's supposed to wrap up early next week. Once that wraps up and it successfully deploys, I'm blocking off an afternoon.
Cool.
So that is my plan. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad it solved your problem. Way to go.
Yeah.
Go Mojave.
Dark mode's kind of cool, although it looks really dumb in the apps that don't support it, which is most of them.
Okay. Does it just make the toolbars and the buttons and stuff dark and everything else is white? Is that how that works?
Kind of, unless if it's designed for dark mode, like you can tell. Like for example, I tried dark mode obviously when I got it installed, and MailMate actually when you launch it looks pretty good in dark mode because it's using all standard elements in the Mac operating system, except for the engine that renders the email message. So everything's nice and dark, and then bam, white white email. Which I'm not sure how you really get around that. You probably have to do some special code. You know, if somebody's sending you a newsletter, for example, and they say the background color is white, I'm not sure that there's much you can do with that. But
interesting. So if you send now, that's an interesting point because I feel like Apple Mail will have the same problem.
Yep, I haven't tried Apple Mail. I despise Apple Mail with the intensity of 1,000 suns. So I haven't even launched it yet.
Fair enough. All I was going to say was if you have like an HTML email, so most newsletters, like those typically have some form of a white background added to them. Like that's just part of how that HTML is built. So I would assume that the rendering mechanism would have to support that. That would be my assumption.
I would think so.
Which would mean that even with dark mode, some of those newsletters will still show up as white.
Exactly. So it's not probably not an easy problem to solve. Also, while I'm on this rant, have you seen the Todoist trailer? Yes, they created a video trailer for their dark mode, which is just completely over the top ridiculous. It's like a movie trailer with like dramatic music in the background and everything. It's like, guys, you released dark mode. Good job, but let's tone it down a bit. And I've seen a couple of these, actually. I prefer like the approach that Things took. And if you go into the App Store and you update Things, they announced dark mode. And their release notes basically just say, yeah, there's only one new feature, but we think it's pretty cool. Here's dark mode. You know, it was not a Hollywood production to announce that, hey, check it out. It's black now. Black is the new white.
Okay, link in the show notes. Step 1. Stop. Go watch that. First reaction, why?
Exactly.
I'm with you. Okay. All right. I don't know why you would do this.
Because you're really excited.
I guess. Apparently.
Nobody cares about dark mode, though, Joe. What people really care about is, did we make our daily me's?
I have a list for my daily me's. Do you have a list for your daily me's?
I do have a list for my daily me's. I've not done well at implementing it, though.
Okay. All right. Why?
So, well, I don't want to give any excuses. I think I just did not do it very well. And I kind of put it off, too. So as we're recording this, this is on a Thursday. Last Friday, I did my personal retreat. So when I did my personal retreat, I went back to the drawing board on a lot of different stuff. So actually, the first follow-up item on the list in the notes that we have is put routines on my calendar again. I did that. So I did that on my personal retreat. I actually used GoodNotes this time, and I created like the wheel of life, and then I just jotted down what went well, what could have gone better, that sort of thing, like all my questions and things. That's on page 2. And then page 3, I took like a blank weekly calendar and color coded it and put like my morning routine on there for the first hour of the day starting at 6 a.m., the evening routine on there, the gym and the running, all that type of stuff. That's all green, glow green, Asian efficiency, core value, become the best version of yourself. So that's kind of the way I associate that in my head. So I did all that. And then along with that, I thought through my daily me's because I don't want to get to the end of the day and just realize I forgot to tie up all the loose ends. So I did make a list of things in Evernote as like a checklist. So I've got my morning routine in there under the morning section. And then I've got my workday daily me. So when I get done working for the day, the 3 things that I want to make sure that I do: clear my email, clear my drafts inbox, and close all my windows and apps. Do I do that every day? No. So that's the part that I have to work on next. And then the evening stuff, I've got read, journal, and set up my clothes for tomorrow. Like that's all part of my evening routine now, getting ready for the next day. Oh, and also part of that, which I forgot to put in the checklist, but this part I have been doing, is planning out my day the night before. Because that's part of my morning routine, is to review that daily plan. So I'm adding that now to my daily me's note. But yeah, I need to do a better job of following this.
Okay. Do you want to know what I heard in that really jumped out at me?
Sure.
Evernote.
Yes.
Why?
Well,
of course, that's the piece I pick out.
Yeah. No, I'm not happy about it. Let's say that.
Okay.
But I was looking at the options for like a simple checklist. There really aren't a whole lot of great options for that sort of thing. There's Evernote. I've got a buddy who's really into Notion, which actually is pretty cool, but it hasn't, I don't know, it seems fairly new to me, and it seems like one of those things that I could go all in on and then it disappears, or it gets acquired, or whatever. I've already got an Evernote account. I'm already paying for the Evernote account. I wanted to have a place where I could store this plus some other things. So another one of my action items is the mistakes log. Okay. So I have a mistakes log in Evernote, again, because I can't append to a note in day one. I can't append to a note in any other system. I can do it in something like Ulysses, but I didn't really like the way that looked, and I don't use Ulysses that way as like, this is the reference material sort of thing. So looking at drafts and, what can I append to? I can append to text files and Dropbox, stuff like that. You can also append to Evernote. So, okay, that's 2 votes for Evernote, I guess. I may as well just go with this for now. And when I get frustrated with it, then I'll look for something else. But I didn't want to not do this because I didn't have a tool that could really support it. So that was the thought process there.
Fair enough. There are places I think Evernote still serves really good purpose. I just don't see it for myself. I have a lot of issues with Evernote and fight it whenever it comes up. So
I do too. I mean, literally last week I was telling everybody don't use Evernote because they just laid off like half their company. Like they're not going to be around much longer. But looking at what's available right now that fits my needs, like there really isn't a whole lot.
Yeah.
At least not anything that I can use the way I want to. So drafts is great, but I don't know all of the code behind it. Like it's got a built-in integration where you can append to Evernote. I don't have to worry about that with, I'm sure I could hack my way in there. Rosemary Orchard probably has a way to do this, but I don't understand it. So this is the simplest solution is the best solution in my case.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm not an Evernote fan. That's no surprise. I think whenever, and I've got some action items from today's book that I think will play into that conversation a little bit later on, but with like the checklist piece, I just do that in OmniFocus. That's how I do that, Mike.
I thought about that.
Lazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, OmniFocus, that's my other action item here is to rethink the sequential projects in OmniFocus, which
all right.
I didn't do a very good job of this either. But to be honest, everything was crazy up until the personal retreat, and so I need to do a review and maybe a new pave of my OmniFocus, to be honest. It's gotten a little out of hand. I'm off of work today and tomorrow, so I will, I promise right now, dear listener, by the time you hear this, I will have gone through OmniFocus and cleaned it all up. I'm not a hypocrite. But it is, I can tell, I can feel the friction, which is something that we're going to talk about in today's episode. And I can feel the friction from the system not being maintained to the level that it should be, which kind of ties back to the daily me's. And I that's one of the things I like about these action items is it forces me to follow through on this stuff. Like I can, in the back of my head, know that, hey, I should go through OmniFocus, or I should create the list for my morning and evening routines. And when I shut down at the end of my workday, but Bookworm is the thing that actually causes the action more often than not. So,
go Bookworm. I'm looking through your list here. I think the only one that's outstanding is a mistakes log. Did you do this?
Yeah, I have this in Evernote because I needed to append to it. So I do have a mistakes log. I'm not going to share what's on the mistakes log.
Aww.
But I do need to. It is kind of cool. One of the things that's hard with this is that I tend to move on from those things fairly quickly. So it's a little bit hard at the end of the day if I don't capture it basically when it's happening, which it doesn't happen all the time. Then I tend to forget about those things. So I do need to get better at that, but I've got the system set up now. I can just jot it down in drafts. I've got a drafts action, which appends to the mistakes log. So hopefully that will become a habit.
Sure. Well, I developed a daily mise as well. I simply created a checklist called Mise en Place in OmniFocus because I'm lazy and I know that OmniFocus can do checklists. So I just did it in OmniFocus because I'm lazy. So what is on that list? I suppose it'd be easy if I look at it. So the idea here that I think I'm landing on is that this needs to start about 30 minutes before the end of my workday. And the exact mechanics of some of the items on this list are still kind of up in the air just because my whole OmniFocus system is kind of in flux right now. OmniFocus 3 really screwed with how I do things. Maybe in a good way. I don't know. It's still up in the air for me. I really was not a fan of the tags switch, so I'm coming around to it. I'm trying. I don't really get an option at this point, so I'm being that person. So now that they're here, my thinking is, I should really embrace this if I'm going to use them at all. I guess I could just say I'm only going to have single tags on everything, but...
Yeah, exactly. If you want to just keep your context, you could just use the single tag.
Yeah. But the other thing, too, is whenever I switched, some of my perspectives broke as well, and a couple of those I relied on, and I actually, I have to rethink how I build those. I can still get it the same way I want. I just have to redo it. Not a huge deal, but... it's one of those, it's a classic. Whenever you have, and this isn't a crisis, this is a task manager, but bear with me. When you have a big change of some sort or something is thrust on you like that, that's the time when you should stop and rethink it because you're already going to change. So it's easier to make bigger shifts when you're already in the middle of that. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I have a lot of adjustments that I've been making to my system as a result of that upgrade. I have not moved to Mojave as we talked about, but I am changing how I store a lot of things in OmniFocus. So because of that, I still have some issues with how I do some of this. Regardless, I still have a mise en place project, and I'm sitting here looking at it. It has some things like clearing out inboxes, flagging tasks for tomorrow, because that's the whole plan for tomorrow thing, which I don't really like the concept of flagging in OmniFocus 3. I don't know why. I think it has to do with one of my other action items. I'll get there in a second. But I've got some things on here like cleaning up my digital workspace, cleaning up my analog workspace, so my desk, getting to that here in a second as well. But then I have a couple things on here because this particular list goes beyond the end of my workday and helps me jumpstart my family transition as well, which sounds a little odd when I first say it. But like, for example here, I have read until 4 o'clock. So 4 o'clock is when I typically get off work. So read until the end of my workday. And then I have an item here, just to make sure I don't forget this, but I want to pray over that family transition, and at least that's what I call it. Because I don't have a commute home, because it's 7 steps upstairs, and I'm now in the midst of my family, the transition period between the moment whenever I'm still, 100% on work and the time when I'm engaged with my family is very small. Like, that time frame is very tight. So I want to pray over that transition so that it goes well, because it's too easy for me to still be in work mode and still be, driving, and I need to stop and go have fun. Like, that's what I'm praying over. So just praying that that's a good transition. So I highly recommend it. It goes well for me whenever I do it. Don't always do it, but I should. Once I get to after work, quote unquote, I have some kind of lame things here. Like, things like checking on laundry, checking on, how are dishes? Do I need to wash dishes quick? Put them away, that sort of thing. Take out the trash, like simple stuff. Just because in our household, those things tend to not always get done. And I found that if I just put them on this list, they have a much better chance of actually getting done. So that takes me through that process. And then once that's done, this whole mise en place checklist is done. And then I'm off to the races for the afternoon. So I do it at the end of the workday. And, a couple of the steps in there help me set up for tomorrow. And I don't know, I seem to like it. I've run it a number of times since we last talked. I think I'm still tweaking it and adjusting it, but it seems to be going well. So I'm going to keep trying with it, because I think it's one of those things that will forever and always be adjusted. So there you go.
So you check things off as you do them, and then it just repeats the next day?
Yes. So the project itself, you're asking about like the OmniFocus structure itself. Is that what you're...
Yep.
I have it set to repeat. The project itself repeats. I just have it on weekdays. I don't run this on weekends. So Monday's kind of a tough one just because it's bigger than normal. But Monday through Friday, I have it to repeat during those days. And then I have the defer time on it. I don't have a due date, but I have a defer time on it to set for, 3:15? Because the idea is that I start this at about 3:30. So I want it to show up before then. And then whenever I check off the last item on it, that's when it completes the project automatically. That's how that works mechanically. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So one of the things that makes me not want to put like the daily me's in OmniFocus, and maybe this is something that I should just do, is I don't really want to go in and check the things off.
Sure.
Like, I want to just crank through the stuff. I want to make it a habit and not have to track it. I want OmniFocus to be for quote unquote the more important stuff. But maybe that's just something I need to get over in my own head and just stick it in there.
Yeah, I think this depends on how you see this checklist working for you. I have a tendency to use checklists in the way that airline pilots do, in that, like, this is what I want to be doing at this time, and then I reevaluate those checklists on a monthly basis. And if I have something in that routine that I want to change, I just change the checklist, and it's easy for me to like change my habits that way, just because all I ever do in that scenario is run the checklist, which makes it sound kind of robotic. But at the same time, like, I'm not sitting there looking at the list and running down each item. It's one of those do confirm, if you remember the checklist manifesto.
Yep.
It's the do confirm type of list. So I tend to run the whole thing, and then when I'm done, look back at it and make sure I got it all. And if I didn't, that's when I do the ones that I didn't do. That's how I do it. and then it's easier for me to make adjustments in the long run. So no, I'm not just sitting there looking at it the whole time. That sounds crazy to me.
What about hyperscheduling?
Hyperscheduling, I haven't really done this. So the next two. So hyperscheduling and then working with the OmniFocus forecast view. With OmniFocus 3, they brought over the forecast view, which has like your calendar and the deferred and due items throughout the day, and it puts them in a single list. Love this. This is genius, I think. So it's easy for me to look at this and see my entire day. Now, I'm only 2 or 3 days in on this, so I don't really have a good verdict other than I like it a lot. And this is what's screwing with some of my mise en place process, because they have some features with how you can put things on that forecast view as far as like how you tag them to get them to show up there. And I haven't fully played with all of that. I've still got to go through Sparky's field guide, and then I'm working through some of Tim Stringer's Learn OmniFocus things as well. There's a lot of stuff in there that like I feel like those guys know how some of this stuff works, and I'm just trying to think through the mechanics of what I want and then using them to help me figure out how to get what I want. So that's what I'm doing right now. So those two, between the hyperscheduling and the forecast view, like they're kind of working together to help me create like my plan for the day, but I haven't been real good about figuring out how to actually get it to show me what I want. So that's the piece that I'm working on. So I'm getting there, just not there.
On the topic of the Mac Sparky Field Guide, that Mac Sparky guy is crazy. He released the Siri Shortcuts Guide, which is 3 hours of video, the week before, and then the next week releases the OmniFocus
I know.
Field Guide update, which has like, I think 5 hours of video.
Yeah.
Man.
It's long. It's a lot. I kept wondering if he still had legal clients after that. It's like, what have you been doing? Did you drop everything and just do this? Yeah.
Props to you, David.
Yep. All right. Last item here, sketching my workspace. I didn't actually sketch it, so I don't have a picture to send you on paper. I sat at my desk and started rearranging things until it felt right, which is not the way you're supposed to do this. So maybe I'll take a picture of this.
You do that, Joe Bulick. You take a picture with your digital device instead of sketching it with your analog pens.
Thanks. I do have my fountain pens sitting here. They're within arm's reach. I just didn't use them for this.
Of course.
My wife wanted me to like draw it all out into scale and then like cut out little pieces that were the same size and then rearrange them on the piece of paper. It's like, that sounds like way more work than just moving the thing itself.
Maybe that's why you didn't do it.
It could be. I got this idea of a super complicated thing in my head. Could be. Anyway, there you go. Follow-up done.
All right. Sweet. Let's talk about happiness.
Woo! Happy. Yay.
Today's book is The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. Is that how you say his last name?
That's how I've heard other people say it, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. I picked this book, and I picked it basically because a few people told me it was really good, and I thought it was a little bit different take, a little bit different topic than a lot of the stuff that we cover on Bookworm. Actually, it seems like the last dozen books or so, they've kind of been along the same vein, other than Work Clean, which was the last one. But we tend to get like different perspectives on the same topics, and they reference a lot of the same studies and stuff like that. So I wanted to pick something a little bit more outside the Bookworm box. And I think that this book delivered. It definitely is research-based. He has a link to a whole bunch of studies in the back, and some of them are familiar. But for the most part, this is not focusing on productivity or maximizing your potential or anything like that, although those are all benefits of happiness. It's really just cultivating a happy state. And as it turns out, happy people are productive people. But it's I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job explaining this, but it's a different approach. It feels very different than a lot of the books that we've read, in my opinion, anyways.
It kind of feels like I don't know if you could say like the next generation of productivity book, maybe, but it's along the lines of like the meditation and enjoying your work and getting past the concept of like burnout. Like it feels like it's approaching that side of things and has a lot of tactical examples and stories for how to Basically, be happy and productive, and not just productive.
Yeah, I mean the book is on happiness, so by nature it's a little bit more emotional than
Right.
a lot of the books that we've read. It's not just, hey, do this thing and you'll get this result. There's a more human element to it, I guess is the best way
Sure.
to describe it. And also, Shawn is a really good writer. He's pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the more entertaining books that we've read, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd give you that for sure.
So there's, again, 3 different sections to this book.
What? Really?
Yeah. Although, if you look at my mind node, because I hate it when one side is like overweighted, and I try to balance things out. But if you break it down into the 3 sections, the first section, there's almost nothing there. The second section is where all the 7 principles are, and that's where all of the notes are. And then the third section is really like 10 pages at the end.
Yes.
And so I don't like the way that this mind node file looks.
Yep. It looks like the editor said, we need to break this up into 3 pieces. And
Yeah.
here you go. I don't really want to do an intro. I just want to talk about all the principles. So here's your intro you're making me write. Oh, and you're making me put an outro too? Okay, well, here you go. Like, that's what... that's how it feels to me.
Honestly, if they would have described it as intro, content, outro, it would have been perfect, because that's exactly what part 1 and part 3 are. Like, there's
True.
no masquerading this as like, oh, this is the first part, No, this is
Right.
just an introduction to the topic. The topic is great. The 7 principles are awesome. Tons of good stuff there. And then the last part, just applying this, call it an outro. I mean, it's called the ripple effect is the third section. But really, it's just like, okay, what are you going to do from this point on? And there's really not a whole lot more there. Like I said, the meat of this is in the 7 principles part 2.
Right.
The first part is officially titled Positive Psychology at Work. And this kind of talks a little bit about like neuroplasticity and the growth mindset and how your brain can change. But really, like I said, the majority of the content in this book is those 7 principles, which I put in the outline, and I called out a couple things from each section. But we can, pick and choose, or just crank through this if you want, however you want to do this. There's a couple things that I wrote down, which would be cool discussion points, I think. But otherwise, I think that you can kind of tease out pretty easily from each of these sections the main points, and there's not 24 of them we got to crank through. So
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, I think we should just jump into them because, again, like part 1, what is it? It's 30 pages, just over. Part 3 is about 10 pages out of a 210-page book. So
Yep,
guess where all the talking points are.
exactly.
So let's just jump in. So principle number 1, he just calls it the happiness advantage, and just jumps right in with a definition of happiness. And I can't find his definition here. Do you have it?
I've wrote down a couple different things from this section, because one of the sections in my outline is what is happiness, and that's what I put in the outline there. And he mentions that there's no singular definition to this because it's relative to the person who's experiencing it. But on page 39, he says pleasure combined with deeper feelings of meaning and purpose. And he also referenced a definition from Socrates, I believe, which I liked, called human, and he just said it was human flourishing. So happiness is being able to flourish in your work, your personal life, really like all the different areas, and you can find whatever systems which break your life down into however many different parts. But really, happiness is being able to flourish in all those different areas to the best of your ability, in my opinion.
It was Aristotle, but...
Aristotle. Dang it.
One taught the other. Which way was which, Mike?
I'm going to change that on my mind node file right now.
Did you write Socrates on your outline?
I did. I don't know why.
I'm going to make sure. Page 40, I think. Yeah, Aristotle.
Yep.
Eudaimonia, which translates not directly to happiness, but to human flourishing. Yep, Aristotle. Sorry.
No, thank you for correcting that.
Got it. Way to go. Yes. So one of the things that I think... All right, so this might be confession time. I don't know. Whenever I got through this point, given like what's been going on in my life lately, I read that and thought, that sounds nice. So it's like I'll just be upfront. Like I do not feel like what I have been through lately puts me in a spot where I've been very happy, I guess. It's been very stressful and emotional, somewhat angering at times. And even before we started recording, I told you that, like, okay, clients have been mean to me today. So today's kind of a rough day for Joe. And like, I just feel like that's been the norm, at least this week and maybe even this month. So it's like, okay, I'm just tired. So hopefully I've got some action items from this book that I want to get to in a little bit, but the nice thing about his groundwork here is that it does lay the foundation for what you can do when you're in a situation like what I'm currently in. So I think this is good timing. So good pick, Mike. So I'm kind of interested in some of the rest of this as well, just because I know there's a lot of pieces of this that could be very applicable in any stage, but especially when you're going through a stressful time.
Yep, definitely. And he talks about how happiness leads to success in the different areas, and it's an interesting point that you brought up, because a lot of people, I think, view happiness as based on their circumstances. So if the right things happen, then I'll be happy. And really the whole point of this book, I would argue, is that you can choose to be happy, and then it changes how you see your circumstances.
Right.
So even if a bunch of bad stuff is happening, like, you can still choose to be happy. And I know it's easier said than done.
For sure.
But I do think that you can choose to, kind of set the course or just react to what's happening to you. And in this first section, he's talking about why you should choose to be happy. The rest of the section, he talks about the rest of section 2, the other principles, he kind of talks about how you can pull the right levers in your life to get there. But happiness leads to success, he says, in marriage, health, friendship, community involvement, your creativity, your job or your career. The second point I had on this outline was the broadening effect, which he talks about how, like, when you're happy, those positive emotions, they flood your brain with dopamine and serotonin, the positive chemicals, and they dial up your learning centers to higher levels, so it's easier for you to learn stuff and memorize stuff. Helps you organize your information better, keep it longer, retrieve it faster later on. Allows you to think more quickly and creatively. You become more skilled at complex analysis and problem solving. Like, by the time you get done with this section, you're like, okay, you've convinced me. I'm going to try and be happy.
Sure. Yeah, the way I explained it to my wife was that, a lot of our culture and society sees happiness as the result of success. And he basically tries to flip that and say, actually it's the other way around. So, whenever you've got a situation when you just don't see the upside and it's just a down season, like the Bulig household lately, that makes it such that it's even more important to apply a lot of these principles to help you get past that, because it's not something that you have to keep working towards and continue to strive for success, and then you can say, I'm there. Like, the classic is that we work 50, 60 years to get to retirement, and then it's at that point you're supposed to stop and, relax and go to the beach and have a great life. And how many people completely fall apart when they get to that point because there's no purpose that they see? Like, that's the opposite of what you want. You want to figure out how to be happy in the scenario that you're in and let that drive the success later on.
Yep. And in this section, he does give different tactical things that you can do to benefit from the happiness advantage. One of the things that came up in this section was meditate, which I know I saw you posted something, how this keeps coming back to you. That. Yeah. So we may have to revisit that at some point. I won't put you on the spot right here, but
that's fine. You can put me on the spot. I'm good with that.
All right. So I'm curious, because this wasn't what you were referencing when you posted that, I don't think.
No.
But, what's your thought process on this whole idea of meditation? Are you convinced yet?
I am convinced that it works for some people, yes.
But not you?
So you're referencing a tweet for the listeners. Mike is referencing a tweet that I put out because, and I don't even remember what it was. I think it was the App Store had a thing on
Yeah, the 10% happier
meditation
thing.
apps. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yep.
And it was something along the lines of, why does this keep hitting on my feeds? Like, why do I keep noticing this? Well, I also know that, like, it's one of those things where, if you bought a red car, you start to see more red cars. And, it's that whole scenario where, like, I've been thinking about meditation on and off for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it seems like. So, which means that I continue to see apps like Headspace and Oak and all these different like meditation type systems continue to be thrown at me. This book brought it up. Like, it just continues to hit me. It's like, okay, I haven't done anything about it, I'll say that. I don't even have an action item for it, Mike. But it's a thing that I know helps a lot of people to work through like quick scenarios, and they have a lot more clarity. Like, they can let things go easier. I get that. Maybe I haven't stuck with it long enough. I've been in scenarios where I've meditated for like 40 days straight, 10 minutes at a time, and have a hard time seeing any effects from it. Now, is that because I'm just not looking at the right results? Is that because I'm just not, maybe I'm not meditating right, as if there's a wrong way from what I understand?
You're doing it wrong.
So, whatever the answer is there, I personally don't see those effects that people rant and rave about. So I continue to have my skepticism for me personally. I'm not denying that it doesn't work for some people. I just have a hard time seeing it in myself.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So back to the list then.
Sure.
Meditate, find something to look forward to, commit conscious acts of kindness, infuse positivity into your surroundings, exercise, spend money but not on stuff, which I thought was an interesting point. And then use a signature strength, which they linked to a survey. Did you go through the survey, Ed?
I didn't. I feel like I should, though.
Well, I started it. It looks to me kind of like the Strengths Finder assessment, which I think we did a while back.
Yeah.
The Colby one would be another one. I think there is value in identifying the way that you're wired and then using those things that are kind of unique to you. So unique ability would be a Colby term or a Dan Sullivan term for that sort of thing. But there's lots of ways that you can get that idea and express that based on what systems you're familiar with. It's not a specifically Dan Sullivan idea, but the basic idea being that there are certain things that are in your wheelhouse, and if you do those things, then obviously I would say that does make you happier. So one of the things that is simple to do, especially for somebody who is a freelancer or has more control over what they do and how they do it, like you and I. But even if you work in a corporate environment, look for ways to express that unique ability in what you do. There's going to be some stuff that you're going to have to do that you don't really want to do. That's okay. But figure out how to do the tasks that you do have to do in a way that is in line with the way that you're wired. Using that signature strength is the way that they would say it here.
Sure. You want to go to principle 2?
Yeah. So principle 2 is the fulcrum and the lever. Is that how you say this?
I say lever.
Lever? We'll say lever. The fulcrum and the lever. And in this section, he talks about how to maximize your potential. And it's being based on 2 things. So number 1, the length of your lever or lever. How much power and possibility that we believe we have. And then number 2, the position of our fulcrum, which is the mindset with which we generate the power to change. And I really like this part because we all, I think, understand this concept dating back to a first introduction to simple machines and how you've got a seesaw or teeter-totter and you've got the fulcrum in the middle, kid on the right who weighs more than the kid on the left. Like, it doesn't work. But if you move the fulcrum, then you can achieve the balance. Or if you want to move something that's really heavy, you move the fulcrum and then you can use that lever and you can move the big rock or whatever it is. But to apply that to a mindset is a little bit interesting. I really liked the analogy, though.
Yeah, I think, this is one of those that, and Shawn does a great job of telling story after story after story, and in an entertaining way. So going back to an earlier point, he's a great writer. Love listening, or not listening, but reading the stories that he pulls together. And I think there's a lot of ways that you could apply, I think, Fulcrum and the Lever, and there's a lot of different ways that I felt like this concept was maybe, I don't want to say repeated, but reiterated with a different view later on. Like, for example, the Zorro circle, which we'll get to. I could see how the Fulcrum and the Lever is being applied in that principle. Like, it's one where he's I don't want to say reusing it, but just coming at it slightly different. Like, that was maybe a view that I had there, but I do like the concept, though. It's a good one.
Yeah, the key thing here, I think, for me is from page 63. He mentions that happiness is not about lying to ourselves or turning a blind eye to the negative, but about adjusting our brain so that we can see ways to rise above our circumstances. I think this is the natural first argument people will have after reading that first section. Is like, well, you don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying it doesn't really matter what you're going through. Happiness is not lying about the stuff that is happening to you. It's not pretending like it doesn't happen. But he does say on page 68 that our external reality is far more malleable than many of us think and far more dependent on the eyes through which we view it. And I think there's a lot of truth to this. I think a great explanation of this, which is the second point in the outline under this section, is the workaholic's curse. I've fallen into this. The workaholic's curse is basically viewing family time or leisure time as unproductive. And when you do that, it makes it that way. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy idea. If you say, well, I'm not really having a great time with my family, this isn't really restorative, I'm not getting these things done, which I'm thinking about these projects that I need to complete, then obviously that's not going to be the quality time that you would like. When you view something as a waste of time, he says, you don't get the benefits. And so one of the things I wrote down in this section, which I took off my action items because there's just no way that this makes any sense to follow up on, is make the most out of every moment. Well, have you made the most out of every moment? No, I can honestly say next 2 weeks from now, I have not made the most of every moment. But that's the mindset that I want to apply here. I want to be able to, I guess if you're, a corporate environment, the saying might be leave work at work. Like when you work from home, it's almost, it's different, but it can be more difficult in a way because your work is right there. Especially if you work on the internet like I do. Like if you don't tame your notifications and things, like you can be eating dinner with your family and something will happen, and then all of a sudden, like you're thinking about that thing. So I've done stuff. I've got the office. I leave my computer down there. Everything gets ignored after 5 p.m. There's stuff that I've done, but I can still, because it's just down the stairs and I've got this project that's due in a couple days, in the back of my mind, even when I'm upstairs hanging out with my family, I do feel that where it's like, oh, you should be down there. You should be recording that audio. You should be working on that screencast. You should be doing this, that, and the other thing because, we're just watching a movie now anyways, or kids are busy. They're playing with their toys. So they won't notice, if you disappear for a half an hour and get some stuff done. Like that's what I want to break away from.
That's a tough one. And I think it gets worse if the tasks that you can do at home are small. I think about like quick emails. Like that's like the worst because especially if you have it on your phone, because it's too easy to just pull that up and send off that quick response. It's like, no, this is not what I should be doing now.
Yep.
Like it's easy to do that. So just delete it.
Yeah, there is no email on my phone. I have thought about deleting all social media from my phone. I have a feeling if I did that, I just would not be on Twitter at all anymore, which I am on the fence about.
Sure.
I do enjoy Twitter. I'm almost never on Instagram. Those are the two social media networks that I've got on my my iPhone, but I do go look at Twitter almost every day. So I'm not sure. I didn't put it down as like an action item, but I do see like that being the one thing where my attention could be stolen. But yeah, I mean, it's also difficult going back to your point where the things are small that you can do, like cranking out an email, responding to something. That's not something I in particular struggle with because I just tell people I'm bad at email. And if you need to get a hold of me, email is not the way to do it. But I do think that it's also difficult if you enjoy what you do.
Right.
I mean, I love podcasting. I love writing. I love creating the videos that I create, and the ability to go work on those things that other people are going to see and they're going to read and they're going to listen to, and they're maybe going to reply and say, hey, that really helped me out when you explained that thing. Like, that gives me energy. I really enjoy that. But it doesn't mean that working on those things all the time is the right thing at the right moment. So it's a balancing act for me.
Yeah, I think part of this section involves how you view things, and that's, I guess, how you're changing the fulcrum, is just changing your mindset on how things operate. And with this workaholic's curse, one of those is that you're viewing time where you're not producing as lost time, and that's just a wrong view. Whereas you should shift your thinking as to the time away from it is where you get your ideas. Like, if you think of it that way, then yeah, sure, I'm working by playing with my kids because I'm clearing out my brain so that I can, get better ideas for my clients or something else. Who knows? But that shift in mentality, I think, is where, like, I've had that view for quite a while of, when I'm just mowing the lawn or driving, doing errands or something, like trying to keep, I'm not going to listen to a podcast. I'm not going to, you name it, while I'm doing that, just because I want the freedom and the clear white space in that time to let my brain just kind of go wild, because I don't do that very often.
Yep.
So that whole shift in mentality, I think, is most of what he's talking about here. I mean, there's some nuances to it, but that to me is the key takeaway from that section.
Yeah, there is another section where he talks about basically if you're working with other people or you're a manager or a leader of a work team. He kind of talks about like whether you view what you do as a job, career, or a calling, and I like that description.
Right.
There's one story in particular. I don't think he told it in this book, but I remember it, about the three bricklayers, where the story goes, tourist walks up to the first guy. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I'm laying bricks." Goes up to the second guy. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm building a wall." And goes to the third guy. "What are you doing?" "I'm building a great cathedral to my God." And they're all doing the same thing, but they're viewing the work that they do differently. The one guy's just doing it because somebody's making him. The second guy's doing it because this is what he does. The third guy has really bought into this vision of he's creating this thing. And so job, career, or calling. And I think this is important if you work with people underneath you, because you have to cast the vision for what they're doing. This was one of the things that I took away from this chapter, even though I don't work with, a work team underneath me at the moment. I'm really like the whole topic and idea of leadership. I want to become the best leader that I can. And so page 81, he talks about the fastest way to disengage an employee is to tell him his work is meaningful only because of the paycheck. Yep. Which I've seen people do that. It's like, well, we want to do this. Why do we want to do this? Because we're going to make a lot of money. I'm like, well, okay.
Right.
And that just has never sat well with me. And again, I don't have an opportunity to play this out right now, but I do want to kind of file this away. And I think I've done that already, because it really hit me when I read this section, that when I work with people and we're working as a team, it's not going to just be monetarily driven. Like it's going to be casting the vision for the thing that we're doing. And if they're not super excited about it, maybe they're not the right people for the job. Maybe this isn't the right fit. But I think that that's really important as a leader, because there's this other concept in this chapter, Pygmalion effect, I think is what he called it. When our belief in another person's potential brings that potential to life. I think this is a super cool idea. and I can't wait to try this out, where you've got somebody who maybe they've been told their entire life, like, this is who you are. This is what you're capable of. Side note, when my dad went to school, they had this thing called a predictor. And so when he was in high school, he hadn't gotten very good grades because he just was not interested. And then the predictor, based on his previous work, had said, like, this is the best you can do. And so junior, senior year, when he's trying to get into college and he's acing all these exams, like, they're dialing down his grade because his predictor said, no, this is the best you can do. And so he wanted to go to Marquette University in Milwaukee. He ended up having to go to University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh for a year to get good grades there before he could get into the school he wanted to. And I think, like, there's a lot of people, maybe there's not a formal system like that anymore, where it's like, no, based on what you've done previously, this is the cap. This is your maximum potential. And you put people in those boxes. But I think people have been put in boxes like that for their entire lives. And I just think it's really exciting to recognize that every time you work with somebody, even like the discipleship group that I lead at my church, like any organization, any team that you're a part of, looking for the real potential that people have and drawing that out of them, like, that's a really exciting idea to me. So this whole idea of the Pygmalion effect really excited me.
Yeah, I think it's a crazy concept that just shifting the way that you think about something changes, like, how you, like, so it changes so much in how you approach a problem or even a season of life. Like, it just changes everything. And you approach it differently from an action stance just because of that simple shift in thinking. It's just nuts how small of a change it takes to pull that off.
Yep, exactly. And that's really the whole idea of this whole section. The fulcrum and the lever is just moving the fulcrum makes the job that you were going to do. Maybe it was impossible, but you change your mindset a little bit and now it's possible.
All right, so let's go on to principle 3, which is the Tetris effect. I really liked this one. I guess this kind of applies to what I was saying earlier about, like, you buy a red car and you see a red car everywhere. It kind of plays into that a little bit. The name of the principle gets pulled from
the game Tetris.
Well, yeah, I was playing Tetris, but I was trying to remember if it was a study or if it was just people who did it. But essentially what it is that if you play Tetris a whole lot for, say 3 hours a day for a week, you start to see patterns in buildings, and you wonder, if I turn that building on its side, would it fit between those two houses? Or if I put this car this way, would it fit in traffic a certain way? Like, you start to try to piece things together because your brain starts to function that way. So it's basically carryover.
Yeah, and it was a study because they played Tetris for 3 days, and then they saw these shapes everywhere.
That's
and he starts this chapter, interestingly, like, he talks about how he mentions the Tetris study a little bit later, but he starts it with a personal story of how he's got his hand on the police car because he's going to steal this police car at 3 a.m. because he's been playing Grand Theft Auto all night. Which,
great way to start a story, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And he basically says, like, he never would have rationally decided to do that sort of thing, but he'd been playing this video game for so long that, like, he walked out of his dorm room and he's looking for a car to steal. And I don't think he was really looking for a car to steal. He did not follow through with it, but it is interesting. Like, I've kind of always believed that about video games to a certain degree. Never really had any scientific data to back it up. But I do think that those images that you see over and over and over again, they do have an impact on you. You can't say, well, I'm going to go play these shooter games and then not recognize that you're a little bit more violent or prone to violence than maybe you would have been. And this is crystal clear for anybody who has kids. I mean, if you put little boys, especially, speaking from my own experience, there's a direct correlation between the amount of screen time that they get playing video games and how crazy they are when they get done.
Right.
So, yeah. But anyways, that's kind of a derivative of the topic that he's talking about here. Really, the idea behind the Tetris effect and the problem with this, he says, is that paradise becomes a hell when all you can see are the problems. So there's a positive Tetris effect, which is kind of what he gets to at the back part of this chapter, but there's also a negative Tetris effect, which is a cognitive pattern that decreases your overall success rate. Interesting fact from this section, he mentioned that lawyers are 3.6 times more likely to suffer from major depressive disorders than the rest of the employed population. You know, they make a lot of money, and that's kind of his point, is that money obviously does not equal happiness, but lawyers are trained to be critical rather than accepting. And these are his words, not mine. So all the lawyers listening, I apologize. But this is what Shawn is saying based off of his research. And he mentions that it's hard to compartmentalize, what makes people successful. But when you do train your brain to constantly look for those things that are wrong and places that people have broken the law and things like that, that does have a negative effect on your state.
I feel like I fall victim to this a little bit. And it's because when you do development, a lot of your time is spent looking for errors and trying to figure out what you did wrong. Like that's that is a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
And it kind of rubs off. Like I find myself even outside of working hours just noticing all the things that I'm not doing the right way.
Yep.
Like this was one of your action items, I think, was like the whole, keeping a mistakes log. Like I don't need to do that because I know what I did wrong. I know exactly what I did wrong. And it's a thing that I feel like I do a lot. The problem is that, like, with the shift to pro course and building a team, I'm also reviewing other people's code on a regular basis and looking for errors there as well. Which means that I'm in a place where I'm looking for errors with other people as well. That is not a good habit to build. That does not go over well. So I definitely resonated with this, but in a very negative way.
Yeah.
This is not a thing I should be doing. So this one really struck home and made me really rethink how I come at some things, just because I definitely see this, and it's not a good thing. It's not.
And recognizing that it happens is really the first step. And when he's talking about the negative Tetris effect, and he describes it as a cognitive pattern that decreases your overall success rate, he basically makes the analogy of your brain as a spam filter. So if you train your brain to see the negative things, then the positive things will be filtered out. But the easy remedy for this, and I say easy because it's simple, not because it's incredibly easy to do, but he talks about the positive Tetris effect. You're scanning the world for opportunities and ideas that allow your success to grow. And he gives 3 specific things that contribute to this positive Tetris effect, the 3 different blocks of positive Tetris, I guess, are happiness, gratitude, and optimism. I believe we've talked about gratitude a little bit on this podcast before, or is that a conversation that we have not had?
I feel like we've talked about it, but not at length.
Okay. So just real briefly, gratitude is something that impressed me, I don't know when that was, maybe a year or 2 ago. And this is something that I have implemented into my own life. My wife and I, every week, we have our date night. And this sounds really cold and not exciting at all, but we have like our family meeting when we do our date night. It's great for us, though. We love it. She loves it. We talk about the 3 questions of what should we start doing, stop doing, keep doing. A lot of great stuff comes from that. And one of the things that we do at the end of that family meeting is we express gratitude. One specific thing that we are thankful to the other person for from the last week. And that, I mean, when we first started doing gratitude, even before we started implementing it into our family meetings, I recognized right away that you could be in a really foul mood. You could be really ticked at the other person because they did this, and the other thing, which never really is true. I mean, we judge other people by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions, and we tend not to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, even the people who are closest to us for whatever reason. But even if you are really ticked at this other person, if you verbally express gratitude to them for something, my own experience anyways, all of that negative stuff is instantly broken off. You cannot sincerely express gratitude and stay in a negative state. So that just illustrates to me how quickly you can change from a negative to a positive state. You just have to have those supports, that scaffolding to say, hey, knock it off and be grateful right now. And sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to be grateful right now.
Right.
But when you do, when you follow through with it, it's not like it takes hours or days to break out of that funk.
No, because you can do it immediately if you just do the right thing. And this is one of the action items that I took down is gratitude in a couple ways. One is with journaling at night. We'll talk about that one in the next principle. But the main one that I want to implement here is coming up with my 3 gratitudes for the day. This comes from page 102, and he was mentioning like some CEOs that he was training in Africa, and they chose to say 3 gratitudes at the dinner table with their children each night, and that struck me as like, okay, that is a thing I want to do, because not only does it apply the social aspect, principle 7, again, we'll get there, it applies that aspect, but it also helps me break some of that negative searching that I do. It's a way to counteract that, and does so in front of my kids so that I can teach them. It does so with my wife, who is probably the one that I look for mistakes in the most for whatever reason, just because we live together. So there's that, and that is what I'm trying to counteract. Like, I don't want to be looking for negatives in my wife all the time. I would rather be searching for things that I'm very grateful for in that day. And I'd like to do that with them. I think that's helpful in a lot of ways. So that's one of my main action items, and probably the biggest one for me to take away from this book.
Nice. We don't have anything formal like that, but there have definitely been multiple times where we'll be like in the car and everybody is just bickering and fighting. And I'm like, all right, everybody, knock it off. We're going to do gratitude. People are like, I
don't want to do gratitude.
Okay, everybody say one thing that they're thankful or they're grateful to Toby for. We'll go around each individual person. We'll say something about him. Then we'll go to the next kid. And by the time you get done, it's a totally different atmosphere. Right. It's really crazy how that works. So I guess we deploy it tactically, probably because we don't have dinner at home together as a family every single night. We've got 5 kids now, and they're involved with different things, and so someone's always running somewhere, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But I do think that if you're able to do that, if you do have that ritual of eating together, like that's the best place to implement some of this stuff. If you don't, it becomes a little bit harder because you don't have that set time every single day in order to do these things. But I think that's great that you're doing that. And one of the action items that I had from this section was along the same lines, to make a list of the good things in my job, my career, and basically every area of my life. Make a list. I guess I'm keeping it in Evernote now.
Evernote.
But looking at that periodically, I'm not sure if I want to do this every day. I mean, there would be value in doing that every day. My concern is that I keep adding things to my morning routine and it keeps getting longer. Maybe it's just something that I do once a week, when I do my weekly review.
Do them at night when you're gaining time by not watching TV.
Yeah, I could do that. But step 1 is to make the lists.
Sounds good. Do it.
All right. Number 4?
Yes, number 4, falling up.
Yeah, number 4, falling up. Basically, this is how you view failure. I think that's the best way to describe this.
It's probably the cleanest way to describe it, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a mental map that you create which offers you 3 different paths after crisis or adversity. The first path is one that keeps circling around where you currently are, and there's no change. This is, I think, the saddest one and the one that a lot of people will default to. This is why the whole idea of the growth mindset that we learned about in Carol Dweck's book is so important, because if you have a growth mindset, you basically will not stay at this one. You're going to go one direction or the other. So the second scenario then is the one that leads to further negative consequences. That's obviously not great. This is why we're afraid of conflict and challenge, he says. But the third one is the one that leads to a place where we are stronger and more capable than we were before. And he calls this the third path. And he says that people's ability to find the path up depends largely on how they view the cards that they've been dealt. So if you think that you got a raw deal and all of these things are working against you, then it becomes a lot harder to recognize that third path, even though it's there in just about every instance of crisis or adversity.
That's the part I struggle with, because I feel like that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
This is the chapter that I needed the most, but didn't like the most.
Yep.
So
this is the one that's easier said than done for sure.
Yeah. Like take it from a business stance. In web development, it's all about how fast you can get your failures out of the way. And the goal there, especially if you're trying to build services, like the goal is to get minimum products out the door, see if the public likes them, and 99% of the time they do not, you cancel it and go on to the next one. Like that is the rinse and repeat cycle you go through. And not a fun one, really, because you've got failure after failure after failure. I mean, if you go look at any of the big names in the tech industry, you know, it's interesting to look at the list of failures they've got before they made it to where they are. And that's a lot of it. I mean, that's the way it works. But they view failure in the right way. Like they see it as a learning experience. And although that sounds easy to do, that is a lot harder to get to, I think, than it seems. Like it's easy to say, sure, failure. I learned X, Y, and Z in the midst of that process. Great. But there's also the emotional aspect of it, which I think is what he gets to in this book, is like, okay, well, you also have to come at this and feel good about having gone through that downturn. So, you know, take Joe's life right now. Like, it's just not been fun. All I can really focus on is the negative for whatever reason, which is why this was good. Because it's like, okay, don't view it as all these things that went wrong. You got to view them as ways to learn and grow from them. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially when health is involved. So it's definitely a learning experience. I think you have to work through that, but it is a mindset shift, and this is definitely one that I know that I need to work on.
Yeah, on page 123, he talks about how we choose to explain past events. He calls it explanatory style, has a crucial impact on our happiness and future success. So optimism, it's not that bad, it's going to get better. Pessimism, it's really bad, and it's never going to change. And that ties into this bank robber story, which was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. This bank robber story, he mentions that there's 50 people in the bank. Robber comes in, and this one person gets shot in the arm. It's assuming you are that one person, are you lucky or unlucky? How do you view that?
When he explained it, my first reaction...
That's the important one, I think, is the first reaction.
Yeah, when I first thought through it, my first reaction was, ooh, I'm glad he didn't hit my heart. Like, that was my first reaction to it. My instant second like half a second later was like, dude, that sucks. I don't want to get hit with a bullet. Like, that's not fun. So
yep.
I am tempted to say I had kind of both, but the very first reaction was, I'm glad I didn't die. Like, that was my initial. What was yours?
I had the exact same thing where at first I considered myself lucky because you could have got hit in the heart, you know, and then right away, well, 1 out of 50, you know, I guess I'm unlucky because I got hit and nobody else did. But I think the locating thing in this exercise is the first reaction that you have. So he mentions that in the study where they did this, 70% of people viewed themselves initially as unlucky, 30% viewed themselves as lucky. And I think maybe we are part of the 30% based on our reactions to this, which I think is probably in line with the growth mindset and everything that we have read in the entirety of the bookworm existence. I think that has contributed to that. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it's different for somebody who this is the first quote unquote self-development book that you read. Maybe you read it and you think a lot of these ideas are hokey and, well, that stinks. Like, I'm completely unlucky in that situation, which ties back to the real point here that we learn helplessness. And they mention a study here. This isn't the first place I heard about this study. I forget where I heard about it previously, but it was quite a while ago, where they put these dogs, and I don't remember all the specifics of the study, but basically the dogs were in this cage. They had this warning that was going to go off, which meant that the dogs were going to receive an electric shock. And the way that they could get out of the situation, prevent the shock, whatever, was to do some certain action that they knew to do. But then every once in a while, if you put them in a situation where that action didn't open the door or whatever, then you've got this variable reward scenario, and eventually they just started whimpering when they heard the noise, and they just laid down because they knew they were going to get shocked, even though they had the ability to escape the situation. I heard a different story one time about this guy who grew up in Alabama, and he told this at a conference. He said he used to catch grasshoppers when he was a kid, put them in a jar, shake the jar, grasshopper goes nuts trying to jump out, keeps hitting its head on the lid. Eventually, you get to the point where the grasshopper just stops jumping. And at that point, as a kid, he would take the grasshopper, put it in a fire ant mound, and the grasshopper would sit there and get devoured by the fire ants, even though at that point, the lid is gone and it can jump to safety. And I think that happens to a lot of people when they're conditioned to, this doesn't work. This didn't work for me all these other times, or it's not going to work for me this time, so I'm just not going to try, which is really, really sad. But also, I mean, you can kind of see how people get to that point. You can't really blame them, I guess, for that mindset. But I do think that a very important truth from this section is that there is always that way out. You may not see it right away, but that third path is going to be there. And if you're constantly looking for that third path, I think that's the real key here, is that you're not going to find it every single time. Sometimes bad stuff's going to happen. But if you embrace this mindset that the third path is always there and you've trained yourself to look for it, more often than not, you're going to find it. And then that's going to result in the positive the positive results, like the MetLife hiring practices that he talks about, where the positive sales agents outsold negative agents by 21% the first year, but that increased to 57% in year 2. So it wasn't just that 1 year in isolation, that series of events, but their approach to how they did everything that contributed to the long-term gains.
Yeah, and one of the ways that he spells out like a way to find that path to understand your way out of it is what he calls the ABCD model, which is the path from adversity to opportunity. And the ABCD is adversity, belief, consequence, and disputation, whereas adversity is the event that you can't change. Belief is your reaction to that event, so why we thought it happened, what we think it means for the future. C is the consequence, what is going to happen as a result of that belief. And then there's the disputation, which is first telling ourselves that the belief is just that, it's a belief, and then challenging it. And I think this is helpful. I will say that this is kind of hard for me to fully grasp as far as how to apply it. And he kind of ends the chapter on that. I kind of wish he'd spelled it out more and spent more time with it.
Yeah, I think this is a really complex section. You could probably write a whole book just on this section.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the model that he put in there. I do think, like you said, it's easier to maybe understand on the surface than to implement in reality. When I heard this ABCD model, I immediately thought of, I think it was the WHIP model from Decisive, for making better decisions. That one seemed a lot more like, here's the checklist, just do these things. This one is like, well, okay, if you say to do this, but it sounds really hard.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that there's an easy answer to this. And also, I think, like, we talked about boundaries and how one of my beefs with that book was that they had this prescriptive approach to everything. I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of nuance to this section, and there isn't, just follow this formula every time you encounter a problem. Trust me, like it's going to be great. It may not be great, and he kind of I thought he did a good job navigating around the sensitivity in this section, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Again, this was a section I felt like I needed, but I kind of wanted him to spell it out more, but that's probably just me and my stage right now. That's probably the one factor there. Anyway.
Do you have any action items from this section, or I mean, you mentioned like this is the section you needed. So what's your big takeaway from this section?
Well, this section laid the foundation for. I have 3 action items, and one of them is the gratitudes I talked about. One is revamping my journaling at night, and that particular one, it's hard for me to say that this is the section that prompted that, but there's like the next 2. Well, maybe this is the place to bring it up. So what I'm essentially doing is it's part of the Tetris effect with the constantly seeing the negative pieces, which I think sets this up for me because it means that I see a lot of failures. And trying to get past that means that I need to be focusing on positives as much as I can right now. And one of the ways that I'm doing that is with the 3 gratitudes at dinner. One of the other ways is through my journaling at night, which I haven't been real consistent with, partly because, with journaling, a lot of people use these journaling prompts where they have questions that they ask themselves and they go through those. And I've used those in the past, but I've never understood the why behind those questions, and I'm a why person. So I don't think I've fully given those the attention that they deserve. Like, I don't think I've directed those questions to myself accurately. So I don't know what questions I want to be asking myself quite yet. This is part of why I have just a journaling revamp. And this particular section prompted that to at least start that conversation. But I didn't fully say that, in my mind, I didn't fully say that journaling is the way that I need to do that until I got into Principle 5, which is the next one. So I can't say that this section is the one that caused it, but it laid the foundation to tell me that this is a thing I need to do.
Gotcha. Well, we will follow up with your journaling action item next time, I guess. I am one of those people who uses the prompts, although it took me quite a few iterations to land on questions that really resonated with me that I didn't want to just skip over every time I watched it. So I understand the struggle, but...
Yeah. Anyway, so let's go on to the next one, because I think I'm going to continue flushing some of these things out. But number 5 is the Zorro Circle, which I like the name a lot on this one.
So the idea here, he steals from the movie. I think it's The Mask of Zorro, but it's been a while since I saw it. There's a guy, Alejandro, who wants to become a sword fighter, but he's way too emotional, and he charges at things way too quickly, and then he ends up losing. So in his training, Zorro draws this circle, and he's like, you can't leave the circle. And over time, as he learns to not overextend himself, the circle gets bigger. And the idea here, as it pertains to your life and not sword fighting, is to limit your focus to a small circle before you expand your sphere of power. So control what you can control, which is really powerful because no matter what your situation is, maybe you don't have control over your entire day. You do have control over your morning or some small piece of your life that you can say, I am going to be the master of this domain. And when you do that, when you have that control, that increases your happiness, your motivation, and even your career satisfaction.
Yeah, so one of my action items is this journaling piece, and the other is around email.
Email is a great place to implement the Zorro Circle.
Yeah, because I suck at email. And if I have any clients listening to this, they know that. One of the things that I slowly get behind on email. Every single day, I'm just a little more behind on it, which means that I have this ever-growing backlog.
Yeah.
I've debated bankruptcy a few times. I have taught this stuff, I know, but the problem is that I have such a high volume that I have to touch, but I also have enough other stuff going on that I don't take the time for it, and it also drains me, so energy-wise to pull it off doesn't work out. So I have all kinds of things I'm playing around with, from hiring a salesperson for the business to virtual assistants. I've played with all kinds of stuff. Ultimately, what I'm doing right now is what he explains in this section. So this comes from page 143, and Effectively, what he does, I think it's an executive that he's working with at the time. He essentially needs to start working through this backlog of email, and in order to do that, he just ignores everything that's in his existing inbox, only responds to what comes in today, and then sets a time limit. So he's going to spend an hour. He only works on what's going on today and then goes as far as he can into, say, yesterday's emails, and just continues doing that day after day until he finally gets completely caught up, and it grows, and he continues to expand where he's working. It eventually even gets into his desk. He ends up having his desk completely cleaned up, and he starts to get a lot of things in order.
Okay.
That is the process I feel like I need to start right now. I feel like a lot of things are spinning out of control for me, which is why I mentioned like the whole OmniFocus rebuild sort of thing at the beginning. There's just a lot of pieces moving right now, and it's been kind of chaotic. So I'm trying to create a little bit of structure. I feel like this is maybe the place to start. Maybe email is the thing I need to start on, to work through and continue to build that. So I'm kind of claiming that my Zorro circle is going to be my email inbox.
Nice. I like that. You know, that approach where you just set aside so much time to work on your email. I think Shawn Blanc mentioned that he does this, where he just sets aside 30 minutes to crank through email, and maybe he'll see your message and reply to you. Maybe he won't.
Sure.
If not, sorry, it's not personal. Just only spend 30 minutes per day dealing with email. I think that's a cool idea.
Yep.
I also want to explain a little bit further something that you hit on there, because you mentioned like you feel like things are spinning out of control. That's the difference between the internal locus of control and the external locus of control, which is really the idea here when you say control what you can control. If you have an internal locus of control, these, even if it's just a couple of things, these are the things that I have control over. But if you have an external locus of control where things are just happening to you, there's nothing you can do to impact what happens to you. You're just a victim of your circumstances. Those are the people who are never really engaged in their work, and happiness hinges on this internal locus of control. I wrote down, this is like, he went through this section pretty quick, but he has a list of advantages of what he calls internals. So I wrote these down because it's pretty substantial. If you view the events that happen to you as within your control, you have an internal locus of control. You have higher academic achievement, greater career achievement, you're happier at work, you have lower job stress, lower turnover, higher motivation, better task performance, higher organizational commitment, you're better at problem solving, you're better at communicating, you've got stronger relationships, you are a more attentive listener, and you are more adept socially. So if there was like a list of things that could get you to embrace a certain mindset, I mean, that's a pretty impressive list.
That is an intense list.
Yeah, but again, he goes through it kind of quick. One of the things I should point out about the way that this book is written, he will throw out a statistic and just put like a footnote there and then link to the study at the end. He's not going to spend 10 pages explaining this is what the research study said. So it's very anti-Mihaly, I guess, the approach, where it's just like, here's the one thing you need to know from this, and then he's on to the next idea, telling some other joke, and there's good and bad, associated with that. Some of those things, like you in the last section, you mentioned, I wish he would have dove a little bit deeper on this, because he's done the work, but he's distilled it down as far as he possibly could. That's actually one of the things that I thought about when reading this, because at 210 pages or so, this is not a short book by any means, but it's definitely shorter than it could have been, which is probably the first time we've ever said that about anything we've covered for book one.
He did a good job of consolidating it,
He did a great job of consolidating it down. One of the sections that he talks about here, which he definitely could have gone on, there's probably whole books written on this particular topic, is the two different modes of our brain, which he calls the jerk and the thinker.
I love that.
Yeah, I did too. So this is also the section where he gets into a little bit emotional intelligence. That came up when we were talking about the power of habit, and how I had a beef with the Starbucks thing, and how like they've tied into part of emotional intelligence. Well, he kind of understands this topic here. So if you really want to dive deeper into emotional intelligence, this is kind of a good section to start with, because it'll kind of whet your appetite. So there's basically two parts of your brain. There's the jerk, which is the limbic or emotional region. And there's this part of your brain called the amygdala, which triggers emotional hijacking, basically. It's the emotional response when something happens. It's the fight versus flight response. Floods your body with adrenaline and stress hormones, triggers that fight versus flight response, like I said, which is great when you are in the prairie and you're trying to decide whether you should escape the tiger that's coming at you or not. But not so great when you're in an office environment. And the problem here is that, if you are in that constant state of stress, that cortisol, the stress hormone, that builds up. And it's basically only a matter of time until your brain gets emotionally hijacked and you make things a bigger deal than they really are. The jerk overrides the thinker, which is the other side, the rational region, which is the prefrontal cortex. This is what you use to think logically, draw conclusions from the data, plan for the future, think, then react. So this is the thing that would say, this probably isn't a big deal, but your amygdala is like, no, violence. It's just basically like it's so loud when you have all those stress hormones in your brain that there's nothing you can do about it at that point. Interestingly, I found from this description, though, resilience, which is the subject of grit, obviously, which we read, that allows the thinker to win against the jerk. So you can do things to build up your resilience, to build up your grit, Angela Duckworth would say, and that allows you to override the jerk and put him in his place.
I just like the terminology, the jerk and the thinker.
Yeah,
like
I
that.
do too.
It's like, okay. That of anything that's in this section, I think that is probably one that's really going to stick with me, just the terminology. Like, oh, the jerk was talking there, like that. I could definitely see myself using these phrases. Don't know if that's a good thing to do or not, but it's probably a thing I'll end up doing.
If we didn't have to use the book titles for our podcast titles, this is definitely what this episode would be. The Jerk and the Thinker.
Yup. They'd pull a Merlin Man. Show title.
Yep.
There you go.
There's also a section in here where it's a short story about this executive who said they wanted to run a marathon. And this resonated with me because this is exactly what happened with me. So the short version from the story is that this person wanted to run a marathon and they just decided they were going to go for it. They were going to just start running long distances and they were going to run a marathon in 3 months. Right away, I knew that there's no way that's going to happen. It took me almost a year to build up the endurance to do my half marathon. However, my half marathon, right before I ran it, I overtrained because instead of running every other day for a while, I started running every day. And I basically doubled my workload like 2 weeks before the half marathon, messed up my knee, was able to finish the half marathon, but then had to go to physical therapy and talked a little bit about that experience in the past. So I went to physical therapy, got everything good. My knee's fine. Now I'm starting to run again. I'm building up my distance, and I gotten to the point where I could run like 5 miles. And they had just completed this Loop the Lake project, they call it, where I live. And this great path. It's a little bit shorter than this bigger loop that I used to do. And I figure, it's probably like 7 miles. I can totally do this. Ended up being 8.5 miles, but I did it anyways. And I went from 5 miles to 8.5 miles and got symptoms of plantar fasciitis, which is really painful. And if you look at it, they say 9 to 12 months to recover from this. I'm like, no, I am not dealing with this. Immediately took more time off because I tried to do too much. And then I've got so just the last week or two, I've been able to start running again. And hopefully this time I've learned my lesson and I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to build up my distance slowly. They say that to avoid plantar fasciitis, what you should do is shouldn't be increasing your distance by more than like 10% when you run. So right away I'm like, well, yeah, I'm an idiot. I ran 8.5 miles and my body wasn't ready for that yet. But it's hard. Like
10%, 30%, what's the difference?
Well, especially for me because I've ran a half marathon before. So, I'm running 4 miles and I'm like, I hate this. Like I ran 13.1, I can do this. I can go a little bit further, but no, like you really do have to be careful. That's kind of the lesson that I'm learning here. And it kind of ties back into this topic here because he mentions like the Zorro circle. The first circle we need to draw is self-awareness. So I need to be aware of where my limits are physically and not push it, and just be patient, trust the process, and build this stuff over time.
All right, so don't go run a marathon tomorrow.
Don't go run a marathon tomorrow. Nope. Don't give in to the jerk. And one of my other action items from this section was to create those 2 lists. And I think this is valuable for anybody who thinks that they really don't have any control of their situation. The 2 lists are basically things that I can control and things that I cannot control. And I'm excited to do this because I kind of anticipate what's going to happen is I'm going to realize there's a whole bunch of stuff on the list of things that I can control that in the moment maybe I view as things that I couldn't control. And so I think that that's going to be an important perspective change and hopefully help me overcome the jerk.
Be a thinker. Don't be a jerk.
Right.
I like it. Anyway, okay. Principle 6, the 20-second rule. Welcome back to the conversation about habits and resistance.
Yes.
Like that's... If I had to sum up this whole chapter, that's what it is. Is that fair?
That is fair. Now, we covered the power of habit, which I had issues with. I have my gap book for last time was Atomic Habits by James Clear. As we're recording this, it's not available yet, but it will be shortly, and it's available for pre-order. I interviewed James Clear for the Productivity Show, and that one's coming out not for another couple weeks yet. But I have to tell you that this book, the Atomic Habits, I am very, very impressed with. It is 10 times better than The Power of Habit. So if you really want to dive deep on habits, go read that book.
Okay.
If you don't care about habits and you just care about happiness, the takeaway here is that we are, as he describes it, mere bundles of habits. So we are what we repeatedly do. What we repeatedly do is based on these habits. There's a bunch of things in this section that we've kind of talked about before. He talks about how willpower is not the answer. Common sense does not equal common action. But the way to change your habits in this, again, small section of this book, which James Clear really does a great job of diving into all the specifics and the mechanics of all this if you really want to dive deep. But if there's something that you want to do, lower the activation energy in order to do that thing. If there's something you don't want to do, make it harder to do that thing. So some examples that he gave from this section were like he mentioned he didn't want to sit down, turn the TV on, and spend the next 3 hours watching TV. So he took the batteries out of his TV remote. Then when he sat down to watch TV, turned the TV on, it's not going on. He could go get the batteries and put them back in. That takes about 20 seconds. He timed it once. But it was just issue friction for him to not want to watch TV anymore. So that extra 20 seconds bought him back 3 hours per day. Hence the 20-second rule.
Right. And this plays into the concept of like sleep in your gym clothes, or set your clothes out for running the night before. Like those concepts. That's what this is. Effectively, it's lowering the entry point, or the removing the barriers or the resistance to doing the thing that you feel like you should be doing. That's what it is.
Yep.
Welcome to habits. I don't feel like we need to reiterate a lot of this because it's we did a whole episode on it.
Yep. So just to clarify, though, lower or eliminate the activation energy for habits you want to create, raise it for the habits that you want to avoid. So one of the questions that I put in the outline, and something that I want to think about, not necessarily an action item, but really something I want to think about, is how can I change the default? Okay, so a couple examples. He mentions we're naturally drawn to the path of least resistance. So we don't send in the mail-in rebates, which are going to save us a bunch of money off of things. We don't click unsubscribe in the emails. We just delete them. Marketing examples, people stick with the default plans for their cell phones instead of looking at the options. The grocery stores, they put the highest priced items at eye level. So this stuff is all around us, and recognizing that the default habits can lead you to negative situations, I think, is important. Then the next question is, how can you set the rules of engagement? How can you kind of flip the script and not just become the product of the bundle of habits that you currently are? What are the things that you can do to change those things? And I think the lever that you can pull is this 20-second rule. So making the things harder for the things that you don't want to do, making things easier for the things that you do want to do. That's a very simple description there's lots of different habits that people will talk about. You should do this. You mentioned journaling earlier. So if you go online and you search for how do I start a journaling habit, they'll give you X, Y, Z, 7 simple steps, whatever. But you don't need to know all of those 7 different steps. You just have to know, like, if I really want to journal, think about what are the things that I can do to make journaling easier. Maybe you have your journal set by your nightstand, and your favorite pen is right there. So when you go to bed and you see the journal, you're like, oh, I forgot to journal. Oh, I want to use that pen. Like, that's enough incentive for you to follow through and do the activity that you want to create. But that you can apply to just about any situation. And I think that's the important takeaway here.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's all about making it easier or harder, depending on if you want to be doing it or you don't want to be doing it. There you go.
Yep.
All right, principle number 7, social investment. Go see people. Like that's that was my takeaway.
Does talking to them on the internet count?
Sure, I'll say that. Like, this is okay. So what he gets at here is connectedness to other people is hardwired into our biology. So relationships are vital to health. And he has all kinds of examples of how not having that can cause serious health concerns. Like, that is how ingrained this is. And like, this is again another section I feel like I needed, because right now my wife and I have kind of been turning internally, like, we just got to hunker down and get through this time. Like, that's kind of how we've been. And like, when I got to this section, which thankfully has been a little while ago now, it's like, okay, we need to be getting out more. Like, we need to like have some friends over. We need to be doing that sort of thing, because we haven't been that great at it, and it's helped a lot. So thank you, Shawn Achor, to that section, because I hadn't really thought about it in that way. So it was definitely a thing I needed at the time.
Yeah, me too. This section is pretty convicting for me. My action item from this section is simply be a better friend. Because I tend not to be very extroverted. I tend not to be very social, which maybe people who listen to this podcast and they're like, Mike, I wish you wouldn't talk so much, find that hard to believe. But in real life, prefer to be in the background. And so I would rather stay home with a good book than go out to dinner with friends. And really what I'm recognizing from this section is that this is one of those things that you have to do before you really need it. You can't just, when crisis comes, call up the friends that you wish you would have made last year.
Right.
And he talks in this section, like food and air, we seem to need social relationships to survive. Helps people bounce back from setbacks faster. They accomplish more. They feel a greater sense of purpose. I mean, I understand all of that rationally, but it's still hard for me to do. One of the stories that he tells in this section, which really made this hit home for me, and I think this is the way that I can actually apply this. This is enough of a mental model for me to sink my teeth into. And one of is this whole idea of an offensive line. So he uses the story of Joe Montana, but really just about any good quarterback would say the same sort of thing. Like, if they've got a record-breaking year, they always thank their offensive line. The 350-pound linemen who are standing in front of them, which give them the space to be successful. And at page 181, he says, we can't always stop the 350-pound linemen flying at us, but we can all invest in a strong offensive line. So again, not an action item, because I don't think that this is something that I really want to share publicly on the air, although we've done something similar in the past. But something I just want to think about is, who is my offensive line? Who are the people that I can count on where if something really just messed up happens tomorrow, who can I call for help? Who do I know is going to be there? And there are a handful of people that already I can think of that would be on that offensive line. But the thing is, Like, you can't just assume that because they're there right now, like they're always going to be there. What I'm recognizing from reading this section is that I have to invest in those relationships. The people who actively invest in their relationships are the heart and soul of a thriving organization, he says, but this is just, personally that I want to apply this. But there's a whole section in here about what he calls the glue guys, which I thought was really interesting. Like, if you want to have a good team, a good organization, a good business, you've got to have these glue guys who just kind of hold everything together. I'm curious because, you used to work in you mentioned you had like a corporate job. When I was talking to you yesterday or last week when I was stuck at the Minneapolis airport.
Right.
You're like, yeah, glad I don't have to be there anymore flying for my corporate job. But
yeah.
Thinking back, like, can you think of people who fit this glue guy description?
Oh, yeah, totally. There's a number of the teams that I worked on probably would have fallen apart without one or two people on those teams. Just because, and it's hard to say what they did.
Exactly.
Like, that's the part that's so weird about glue guys.
Quote unquote intangibles.
Yeah. It's crazy simple things like showing up with candy one day when you know it's going to be a rough day, or,
yep.
Throwing parties, or just having conversations about what's going on in life. Like, it's crazy how those things shouldn't matter, but make a big deal out of something very small. So, yeah, I can definitely think of certain folks, even flying with some of those folks, like, yeah, they definitely hold teams together.
Yeah, so the challenge for me then is, how do I become a glue guy in the teams and the organizations that I'm a part of? Because sometimes I just don't want to be the glue guy.
Right.
Sometimes I just want to go into my hole. But
just give me a book.
Yeah. So I'm recognizing from this section, this is probably the section that challenged me the most, because this is so anti my nature, but I recognize how important this stuff is.
I will say, going back to like the offensive line concept, with what I've been going through with this whole Lyme disease adventure, is that I have learned that we have a very close-knit group of friends around us, and I can't say that I knew that ahead of time, but going through this scenario, like, I've had friends coming over and mowing the lawn, or silly things like that don't seem like a big deal, but it makes a huge difference to me, especially right now. So that's been a huge encouragement. So it's definitely a thing that I'm aware of on the other side of things. Like, I definitely want to make sure that I'm building into friends as well, as much as they've built into me. Like, that's definitely the way that I want to come at this. So I'm with you on that.
Nice. Another thing from this section that really stood out to me, maybe it's just because I've got 5 kids who are constantly like, hey, Daddy, check this out. Hey, Daddy, look at this. But the response that you have to something that happens to other people is really important. So the tendency can be to, yeah, okay.
Right.
But that is a negative response in the eyes of a kid, but also, like, think of somebody from work or from church, whatever. They're excited about this thing that happened to them. He makes the point in this chapter that a passive response to good news is just as harmful as a negative one. So the only appropriate response when somebody's super excited about something, and this is hard for me, but is to be super excited back, like to have a positive response. Wow, that's great. Congratulations, great job. Even something like, hey, that's cool. Like, that's a negative response. But yeah. I tend to not be that emotional cheerleader type guy. So I can totally see how my natural response is that neutral response. And that's difficult for me. That's something I'm going to have to work on, understanding and really tying into the empathetic nature of, okay, you're really excited about this thing, understanding why you're excited about it, and then being excited about it for you.
Right.
Especially as you become more public in a leadership role. Like, this is something that you got to do over and over and over again.
Right. Cool. What else, Mike? We went through all 7 principles.
We did. Gratitude comes back in this section again, by the way.
I know. It comes back a lot.
He talks about how gratitude sparks an upward spiral of relationship growth where each individual feels motivated to strengthen the bond. So maybe that's what I got to do is I just got to every time we go to dinner with somebody say, this is going to be weird, but let's express gratitude.
Which doesn't make it weird when you say this is going to be weird. So it
yeah, true.
Disarms it.
That's one of the things I like about working with Asian Efficiency. We end all of our meetings with the Roundtable of Gratitude. When we did a live event last year in Austin, we took a bunch of our best customers out to dinner, and we actually did the gratitude ritual at dinner, and everybody said that was really, really cool. But I appreciate the fact that this is a part of the work culture, but you can apply this to really any realm of your life, and I think that it would have positive impacts. If you walk into your job, tomorrow though, and say, "Hey, boss, I think we should express gratitude the next staff meeting," you probably maybe they're not going to be sold on the idea yet, but. That's one of the things I've been thinking about is like, if you're not the decision maker, this isn't part of your company culture, so to speak. How do you implement this sort of stuff? I don't have a simple answer for that. But I do think that those situations like that, where it's going to be the hardest to implement, those are also the situations where you'll get the most benefit from it.
Right. All right. Action items. I think we've talked about them all, but I suppose we should summarize them just so we have them all in one place.
Yeah. So I've got make a list of what's good in my life. I've got create 2 lists for what I can and can't control, and be a better friend. Hopefully I'll have some success story from that one next time. The other 2 for sure you can hold me accountable to. This one we'll see.
All right. Good luck. The 3 that I have, the first one, 3 gratitudes at dinner with the family, and then doing an evening journaling revamp of sorts. So I'll have to figure out what my questioning is that I'm going to go through, and I'll share that next time. And then changing up my Zorro circle with my email patterns and how I handle email, because everybody loves email, right? Wrong. False.
All right. So author style and rating. I can go first. I really enjoyed this book. I found it very easy to read. Shawn has a very approachable style. You feel like everything that he shares with you is well researched because it is, but it's also distilled down into just the key points. I mentioned earlier, this is probably the first book we've read for Bookworm War. I thought this could have been longer. Not that I necessarily wanted it to be longer. I guess if there's one particular area here that, from the 7 principles that stands out to you, maybe there's something in there that you're like, I wish I would have dove a little bit deeper on this, but I don't know. I think that the length is good. I like the format. I wish they wouldn't have just said like this is part 1, part 2, part 3, just focused on the content itself.
Right.
But I'm going to give this 4.5 stars. The only reason really it's not 5 stars is that we have covered some really incredible books that have profoundly impacted me, like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Right.
So if we had more stars, it would probably be higher, but it's a very, very good book.
Have to change the scale to a 10-star scale.
I guess.
Well, I'll agree with you. I think this is a very easy book to read. I had 1 or 2 sections where I wanted him to expand more, but that's purely me wanting to know more about that topic. I think he does. Lengthwise, I think he nailed it, which is rare for us. I don't think we usually say that. It's usually the other way around. I was like, why on earth did you write 300 pages on this? I think if he had written 300 pages, we'd say that about this book, but he didn't. He kept it concise and to the point. So I'll join you at 4.5 just because I'm with you. I don't think it's in Man's Search for Meaning category. Like it's not in that level, but it did have a lot of great impacts on me and some challenging action items that came out of it. So well done, Shawn Achor. Highly recommend it. Coming up next, are we still on Hyperfocus? Are we still doing that?
We are. Yep. Hyperfocus is technically both of ours, which we talked about last time. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to cover the book like we normally would, but we're also hopefully going to have a short interview with the author, which is Chris Bailey. I interviewed Chris for the Productivity Show not too long ago, and we dove into some of the specifics of the book. Really what we want to talk about in this one is kind of the whole writing process and how he did it. And he's agreed to do it. So, it's on the calendar. Just hope that nothing comes up to mess that up. But
right.
If it all goes according to plan, there'll be some special bonus content from the author himself in the next episode.
Which will be kind of fun. So hopefully that all works out. That is the current plan anyway. So following Hyperfocus, if I follow the pattern correctly, it's my pick.
Yep.
Which I have selected, kind of a long one, but I think it'll be good. But it's Predictably Irrational by Dan O'Reilly. I have seen this one make the rounds. It's a notable book from New York Times. It was a notable book of the year, New York Times bestseller. A lot of good accolades with that one. So I've heard it mentioned a lot. I'm kind of interested in going through that one. I think it'll be good.
Nice.
Yes.
And then for Gap Books, I've got one which I picked up from an Asian efficiency reader. We had a meetup when I went to Austin for quarterly planning last week, and someone was telling me about personal Kanban, mapping work, navigating life. And this is by Jim Benson. And this is a cool idea because we use Scrum at Asian Efficiency, and we get a lot of people who say, Scrum sounds awesome. My company's not going to use it. Is there anything I can use personally? And so this whole idea of personal Kanban is very interesting to me. I really don't know anything about this book other than it was recommended.
Sure. Yeah. Is that similar to Scrum? I know Scrum is on our recommended list.
Yeah. So Scrum is kind of agile for teams. Scrum and agile are not the same, but basic idea being that you work in these sprints. So personal Kanban is kind of the same idea where you've got the list of things that you want to do. They're in progress, they're being reviewed, or they're done.
Sure.
It's kind of my experience. So I'm hoping that this book is going to be kind of simple systems to implement this into your personal life, whether you are a solopreneur or, there's one book I read at one time where they talked about implementing Agile with your family, that sort of thing. Every time I talk to people about that, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this book is pretty well reviewed, gives some simple systems to implement this sort of thing. Because
Sure.
I do think the Kanban model or Agile or Scrum, there's a lot of value to that. It's just figuring out, what's the stuff to keep and what's the stuff that really doesn't make a difference when you're distilling it down from a work situation.
Sure. Well, for Gap Books, I actually have one this time. I finished up reading Lord of the Rings not long ago at night, and I picked up another one, The Everlasting Stream by Walt Harrington. Kind of an interesting story of how he went from big-time journalist for the Washington Post to hunting rabbits. Quite a journey that he goes through. So it's kind of a fun story to read through. But that's the one that I've been going through at night lately.
Interesting.
So, we were talking about Scrum there a second ago, the book, and that is it's actually the highest voted book on our recommendations list right now, which means
we're going to have to do that one at some point then.
We're probably going to have to do that. And it's not like it's just by one. It's up there a little ways. So it will likely make it onto our list. But if you have a book that you want to put on our recommended list, just go to the Bookworm Club, so club.bookworm.fm, and there's a button there for recommend, and you can just create a new post on the recommendations category and tell us what the book is. You don't have to have read it. Someone was asking me about that. It's like, nope, you don't have to have read the book. You don't have to have a lot of information about it other than you would just like to hear us cover it. So if you don't want to read it and you want us to read it instead, that would be the way to do it.
Give us a good pitch, though.
Yeah, if you don't want to read it, we'll read it for you.
Right. But if you have something that's kind of outside the wheelhouse, we're open to those. But
for sure.
We have to be, me specifically, I have to be convinced. So if you think I should read a particular book, feel free to state your case why.
So make your arguments, lay them out well.
Yep.
And good luck.
In addition to joining the club, you can also leave us a review on iTunes, which would be very helpful. We've got one here that I want to call out by Amozarte. I think it's how you say the name. It says, my virtual book club, 5 stars. Bookworm is a fantastic way to do two things: discover new personal productivity books to read, and or number two, get the Cliff Notes versions of a book you'd like to read but don't have time. So thank you for the review, Amazarte. And if you want to help us dethrone KCRW as the number one return for Bookworm, that is the best thing that you can do. Join the revolution, people. Go to iTunes and give us a rating and review. Helps other people find the show and puts Bookworm in its rightful place.
All right. Go for it. All right. So if you're reading along with us, next time up, we're going to be going through Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey, and we will go through that one next time.